We go. Today is the 4th of September 2009. We are doing a home interview in Granville, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. I'm with the New York State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and your date and place of birth, please?
My name is Earl Montgomery Morrow, and I live in 13 Gilder Hollow Road, Granville, New York, but we're closer to Hartford, New York. And I went to school in Hartford, New York, graduated in 1939 as valedictorian.
Okay, let me just go back a little. When were you born?
June 27th, 1921.
And you were born here
in West Pawlett, Vermont.
Okay.
And after that, I guess sometime after that, Dad was teaching schools and so on and so forth in Vermont, and he decided he wanted to be a farmer, and that's when we came over to New York.
Okay.
And
and you graduated from high school in 1939?
1939, and small class, I think there were 19 of us or something like that. And I stayed around for a year and took a postgraduate course, trying to pick up some of my grades a little bit. And then I went to Iowa State College, studying mechanical engineering. And I got through the first year there and started the second year. And Sunday, the day that Pearl Harbor was hit, I sat there and listened to that on the radio, and I made up my mind right then, at the end of the semester, I'm going home and getting the service. So as soon as semester was over, I got out on the road, hitchhiked from Iowa State, made it in 3 days to the farm up here in New York. Back then, people would pick you up. And interesting, a lady and her daughter picked me up, and I drove for them a good share of the day, and then they stopped, went to a motel, and I think I got a room for $2, and she and her daughter were in the other room. But I took the daughter out to a movie. And then the next morning I got back and we drove, and the roughest part was getting from Pennsylvania up into Washington County. But I made it in 3 days. I got home and told my dad what I was going to do, and my dad informed me that I wasn't going to do that. I was going back to school. And I said, I'm going in the service. Well, he was the director of the people that...
The Selective Service?
Yeah, he was the director of that for Hartford. And he told me he knew the rules and regulations, and he informed me that he would have to sign for me to go in the service, and he wasn't going to do it. So I told him, I says, okay. And
how old were you at that point?
I was 20. And Dad was the kind of a man that you didn't do what he did, you did what he wanted, put it that way. But that's the first time that I ever told him I'm not going back to school. So I went down to Schenectady, went into General Electric and got a job down there as an apprentice machinist, and enjoyed it. The instructor I had, he picked me and another guy, and we were doing real serious work in the machine shop, mostly on the lathe. So, but the day I was 21, I went down to the Armory in Albany, and I'd heard about the Aviation Cadet program. I went down and applied for it. There were 30-some of us went in that morning. 6 of us out of the 30-some got in. The rest of them were rejected. and they told me to be down to the railroad station on Wednesday. This was on a Friday. Be down there on Wednesday morning to depart at 9 o'clock. I said fine, and I went home and told my family what I had done, and Mother was all upset. But I told her, I said, look, there was one boy in that group who was athletic, played every sport there was, but they found he had a heart, he could drop dead any minute. I said, I'm one of the few that got through, I'm healthy, and I'm going. And that made her feel better. Got my, next day my orders to report to the draft board came in, and Dad couldn't do it because I had to go to Granville to their draft board. So I went over there and told them what I was doing and showed them the paperwork, and they didn't do anything but says, well, good luck. Wednesday morning I'm down at the railroad station. Mom and Dad took me down, and one of my little girlfriends went with us, and walk into the station, guy in uniform had a pack of manila envelopes. He came over to me and he says, you have 30 people to get to Fort Dix in New Jersey. And I looked at him and I said, why me? He says, you had ROTC in college. I got him there, but I don't know how. We had to change trains down in New York City, and I got them down there and delivered the papers. Got all 30 of them there and delivered the papers to proper people, and that's the way I entered the service. And we stayed there for a little while, and there were delays in the aviation cadet program, so they sent us over to military field on Long Island and gave us a .45 automatic, showed us how to use it, and put us on guard duty. I'd never fooled around with guns. Dad had a little rifle I shot once in a while. But they gave you a pretty good instruction on the .45. And you'd go out there at night and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was so dark out there. And they said, if you hear movement or anything at all that's not right, you holler halt 3 times and shoot. I killed a cow one night.
Oh, did you?
Just on the outside line, but I hollered halt 3 times and it didn't stop. So, but there were some fellas that actually shot people trying to come over the fence.
Oh, really?
And what they did with them, they were tried, found guilty, charged them $1 and shipped out. And I made up my mind I didn't want to be shipped out. I'm going to this aviation cadet program. So I was real careful, and eventually they took us out there and sent us down to Nashville, Tennessee. They took us down there on a train, and
this would have been around the spring or winter of '42?
no, we're still no 42. We're still in 42, and I'm down there, and that's where you get classified whether you go as pilot, bombardier, or navigator. And everybody wanted to be a pilot, of course, including me, and I made it. And they shipped us out of there to California, which was a real enjoyable trip on the train, because the train didn't go straight to California. It would go south, and then it'd go north, and then it'd go south, so that the Germans, if they were watching what was going on, they wouldn't know exactly that this was a troop train and where it was going. And it took about 7 days to get out there. So I got to see a whole lot of the U.S. on that trip. Got out there, and we went through pre-flight, where you took courses of theory of flight, weather, meteorology, and so on and so forth. And then about January 1st of, I guess it would have been 43.
Mm-hmm.
I got my first flight. Never been in an airplane before in my life. And this was a single engine, open cockpit, and the instructor sat beside me, sitting in the front seat. And they showed us how to start it.
Was it a Stearman? Was it a biplane?
No, single wing.
Okay.
There were Stearmans close by, and we used to dogfight with them.
Uh-huh.
They could out-turn us, but we could outrun them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but second after I'd been up twice, my instructor told me that you'll never make it. And I asked him why. And he says, you're afraid of the airplane. And I asked him, I said, well, can't you do something about it? He says, with your permission, we'll make or break you this afternoon. I said, fine, let's go. Never been afraid of an airplane since. I mean, that airplane, we did everything an airplane could do.
Mm-hmm.
We rolled, we dove, we looped. We go straight up and let it fall back down. And then he went down and actually landed on a big truck going down the highway. Just touched the wheels down on it long enough to sit there for a couple minutes. And then we found a farmer down there. He threw a hammer at us that went over the top of the airplane, so you know how low we were. And that's within 2 days I had soloed on the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had about 6 hours total, and I soloed. And we had class work, and we had flights. We did night flying, we did day flying, we did short landing, and I learned in a hurry, first time right after I soloed. I'm out there flying around by myself, and here's a thunderstorm came up all of a sudden, sitting right there. And I said, now what do I do now? And I looked around, I spotted an airplane with 2 people in it, which to me meant one of them is an instructor. I got on his tail and stayed there, and we went into another landing field. And he says, what are you doing following me? And I says, look, I says, I'm just soloed. I didn't know what to do, and I saw 2 people in the airplane. I figured one was an instructor. He knows what to do. Follow him. And he says, you did the right thing. I got through the primary training, and then we go up to Chico, California, go into basic training. We're into a bigger airplane. It's an enclosed cockpit now, but the instructor sits behind you, and you sit in the front seat. More power. It's a fixed gear, though, and it's a BT-13. Real nice airplane. Now you've got a little bit of formation flying, and quite a bit of night flying, and a lot of maneuvering, precision flying, so on and so forth. And I got through that. The way I got through that, I couldn't do lazy 8s the way I should be doing. But the instructor had me out there, and we were working, and he was just about ready to make me do the lazy 8s, and smoke come pouring up through from the engine into the cockpit where we were. We're on fire or something. And he says, he hollered at me, let's get back to the field. So I swung it around and swung back. We were quite a little ways away, and got it back in and landed the thing, decent landing. And he said, well, if you can fly it under those conditions, you've passed. So I didn't have to do lazy 8s. And from there we went down to Marfa, Texas, got on a multi-engine, 2-engine, retractable landing gear, and about maybe 5 or 6 passenger aircraft. And this is where you're really learning to fly now. You've got a whole lot more to handle. And the pathetic thing was, the day we got down there, they had a hailstorm, And these airplanes had cloth fabric wings, and it tore up every airplane that was outside. And so they asked them to, the other bases around, to give us what they could. Well, they gave us their junk. And most of our airplanes were restricted to level or maybe 20, 30 degree bank, no more than that. But I got through that, and then the last day I was there, I got a new airplane just come in, and they let you go out and play around with it. And so I went out and flew it around. It really was a nice airplane when you got a new one that you could do things with. And at the end of that, now this is in June, which is exactly 6 months from the first time I got in an airplane. And I have my wings and a rating as a second lieutenant. And little ceremony there, and then they sent us down to Roswell, New Mexico. And first day I get down there, I am out shooting takeoff and landings in a B-17. Never even seen one before in my life. And 2 months there, and I'm qualified. And then I got real lucky, and instead of sending me overseas, they sent me up to Las Vegas to fly gunners in training, which was a real plush deal.
Now at that point, were you like a pilot in command, or were you co-pilot, or?
No, I'm before you come out of the B-17 training, you're listed as a first pilot. When you get someplace, then they, if you have, I guess they do it a whole lot by experience. But I was the first pilot all the way through. And but up there at Las Vegas, there'd be times when I'd be sitting in the co-pilot seat. And we had a lot of fun up there training gunners. And you get 10 to 12 guys on your airplane on Monday morning. None of them ever been on an airplane before. So the first day we just fly around and let them get used to the airplane and feeling what it does and so on and so forth. And then the next 5, 6 days and the following week was real serious. They'd have targets towed by other airplanes go by, and these guys would have to shoot at them. And they had cameras so they could tell whether they were hitting or not. And we had a lot of fun. We'd go over and fly down in the canyon in Death Valley. We couldn't get down below. You're down below sea level now, and tell the guys that, you know, and let them see what the countryside is and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden they picked, I think, 5 crews of us to fly some new B-17s down to Tyndall Field in Florida. So the only people on the airplane, I had a co-pilot and a flight engineer, and we flew from Las Vegas down somewhere in Virginia, or forget where it was. Anyway, we landed at an army base down there. But my co-pilot, his hometown was there. So before we landed, we went over to his hometown, and I mean, we dragged it down below, and then we saw people running out of their houses and falling on their face to get out so quick to see what that is out there. And so that night, I go stay with him and his family, and we go over to school where he went to school, and one of the teachers told him, he says, yeah, he says, I was on the 3rd floor and I looked down on you when you went by. But then we went on down to Tyndall Field, and we trained gunners down there for a while. And then we only had 30 days we were supposed to be down there, and then no orders after that. So we figured, well, we'll go back to Las Vegas. And That's the only time I got home, because we saw in the regulations where you didn't have to travel over 200 miles a day if you didn't have Pullman. So we couldn't get Pullman, so I'd ease up there and come up to the farm, visit my folks, back down, get out to Las Vegas, and they asked, "Where have you been?" And you're supposed to still be at Tyndall Field. So they said, "You better get back down there." So I started preparing to go back down there, and then they came over and says, "Okay, you guys aren't going to Tyndall Field, you're going overseas." So very shortly, we were sent over to, someplace in Kansas, and I got my crew.
Mm-hmm.
And
This was a whole new crew?
whole new crew.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that went over there got new crews, and there were people coming right out of school and so on and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
just gotten their wings. So I got my crew, and I was real happy with them. They all seemed like a real nice bunch of guys, and that would be 4 officers, myself, my co-pilot, and a bombardier, and a navigator. We would be officers. Everybody else has a sergeant rating, enlisted men. So I got my enlisted men off to the side where nobody could see us and nobody could hear them, and I told them flat out, I said, "I don't want one of you to ever salute me unless there's somebody standing over there that expects you to, then you do it." And I never had any problems with discipline or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think the crew really appreciated that. And the rest of my crew, when they found out I'd done that, they fell right in with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we started training. We did night flying, we did long distance flying, we did altitude flying, did a lot of formation flying, and of course we were dropping bombs, and the navigators we had to do navigating flights.
Mm-hmm.
And one night we had a hydraulic instrument broke on the instrument panel, and hydraulic fluid just come flying out into my lap, and the boys had an idea. Everybody up in the front would put their parachutes under the pilot and the co-pilot seat, where they could reach them easy, but they would be safe. But those parachutes got soaked, and here we are. We've been up to altitude with oxygen, and we have a very flammable fluid in the airplane. I decided we better get this thing on the ground. And they had a field up there it was an emergency field right close by in one of the middle states.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't even have a radio there. So we had to call our home base, which was down in Louisiana, and they would, on the phone, talk to the people up there at the emergency landing. So they showed us, they said there's a flare on each end of the runway. It's just a field.
Mm-hmm.
So we come in, and we're real low. We got the flares spotted, and just before we were down maybe 50 feet off the ground, and a light turns on up above us in a house. So we threw the power to it and pulled that thing out of there and went around. And this time we came around and we got over the house, and then we got it down, and we got the thing on the ground, and went to the hotels, and we got hotels where we could sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And they told us stay there, and they'll send parts up to us the next day. Well, my boys got busy then. There were a lot of crowds out there because we did some low flying around there for a while that night.
Mm-hmm.
In a small town, they were all out there the next day to see what was going on. So the boys they'd show them through the airplane, but we covered up the bomb site so they couldn't see that because that's still secret. So it was covered up. But the boys were telling the guys, you buy bonds. And they were having a ball doing that. So that morning sometime, another B-17 came in, and it was stripped down. No guns on it, no, just stripped down. And you know, that guy made 3 passes in daylight before he got down the ground. And he was a major, been to combat and everything, and he came over and he said, who the hell landed this thing in here at night? So we got ready to leave, and it's probably the best thing could have happened, because from then on, the crew had no concern about whether Bill and I could fly that thing or not. Bill was my co-pilot, William. So they didn't have to worry about whether they had a safe crew up in the front or not, and which helped a lot. But shortly after that, we get on a boat, we get all our equipment, and then we get on a boat in New York, and in a whole fleet of boats go across.
Now, when was that? What year? Was that 43 by then, or?
Yeah. No, let's see. We're getting into 44 now.
Okay.
We're at 44 now.
Okay.
And it was about 2 weeks on the boats going across, and the closer we got over there, I began to get a little bit thinking about what we're getting into here, and especially when somebody said there were submarines in the area. But it was a pleasant trip over, really, because we were on what used to be a French luxury liner that they pulled out all the luxury and put in bunks and so on and so forth, but they kept the crew. And we have never eaten, I've never eaten as well as we did on that boat going over there.
Oh.
The 3 and 4 course meals. Great. But anyway, we get over there, and then we get a couple days, we get assigned to our base, and a couple days of training, and then the first mission I went on, I sat in the co-pilot seat with a crew that had been there for some time. And I'm out there, and I couldn't figure out what all those black puffs of smoke were. And I thought I was real quick, people were shooting at me. And we got a little battle damage to the airplane that day, but we got back okay.
That was your first mission?
First mission. Next mission.
And where was that mission to?
I couldn't tell you now.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you. But the next mission, they were all over Germany. The next mission.
And you were with the 8th Air Force?
Yeah.
What?
457th Bomb Group.
Okay.
And the wing, I can't tell you.
And whereabouts in England were you based out of?
A little town of Glatton, close to Peterborough.
Okay.
North of London, probably 40 miles or something like that.
Okay.
So the next mission, I have all my crew, except I have an experienced co-pilot in the right seat. And we go out on that mission, and you know, we had damage and so on and so forth. The biggest thing that was bothering, I guess, the crew was those runways up there in England were short, and we're carrying heavy loads. And they told me, before you get all your crew, don't let them sit in the nose. Make them go in the back and sit. And my boys said, no, we'll sit down. And I says, okay, whatever you want. Because I'd already gone on one, and you use every inch of the runway. And the navigator and bombardier, they stayed down front, but that's the only mission they did stay in the front on. They moved the back after that. But we got through that mission all right, and then the third mission, it's my whole crew, our crew. Now, we always left one man home because there was a gun in the radio room that they had taken out. So they figured if you get under attack, the radio operator can go back and get on the waist gun. There's a waist gun on the right side, one on the left side, and the tail gunner and the ball turret gunner and the top turret gunner, and then your bombardier had his turret up front, and then the navigator had a single on each side of the airplane. So we'd always leave one man home. And I don't remember too much what went on these missions with the exception of 3 in particular. And if you'd like me to.
Sure.
Okay. This one we were going pretty deep into Germany. And on the way in, we lost number 1 engine. We figured it had to be a fuel pump or something because it just quit on us. So we feathered it. So we're going down. We're pulling full power on the other 3 just to stay in the formation. If your formation makes a right turn, now you're in a formation probably of 1,000 airplanes, and you're flying in your squadron, which is 12 airplanes, and the squadron is flying in a group, which is 3 squadrons. So there's 36 airplanes right there in the group. That's what we put up. And when they make a turn, if you're on the outside or on the inside of that turn, you're going to be stalling out. So you've got to keep working on that, stay in your formation. Now if you're on the outside, then you got to use full power just to stay in. And inside you're to the point of stalling out, and outside you're full power. But we got on up there. My co-pilot was going to fly the bomber on this day, so he was flying it, and we come down, and just before we dropped our bombs, we got a direct hit on number 3 engine, and I go through feathering procedure, which is, by feathering I mean you shut that engine down and you set your blades so that they're parallel with your flight, so they aren't a wind, they aren't a drag. So I went through the feathering procedure, shut down and everything, and nothing happened. Still windmilling. So we came off the target and we immediately had to get out of the formation because now we got 2 engines and 1 windmilling, and there's no way we can stay in the formation. But at least we gotten rid of the bomb load. So we pull out there, and this engine, it turned red hot, the dome of it. And then it turned white hot. And then it started breaking up and parts flying into the airplane. And they come through just thin skin. So we had to stay out of the plane of the props. So we decided that, Bill and I decided, well, let's see if we can dive this thing, and then we'll haul it, pull the nose up, and see if that prop gets spinning. Maybe it'll break loose and go. So we dove twice, and we lost a couple thousand feet. And I told Bill, I said, look, we can't lose any more altitude. We're going to just have to leave it like it is. So we started back by ourselves, that engine windmilling. We got number 2 is running and number 4 is running, and 3 is windmilling and 1 is feathered. So we're losing altitude all the way. And we got to come all the way across Belgium, which is occupied. So they're shooting at us all the way across there, but we wouldn't fly over 10 seconds straight, then we turn. 10 seconds and turn. And that way they couldn't line up the big stuff on you. And the fighters, our fighter stayed up above, and one of them called us and he says, hey, it's too hot for us down there. We'll sit up here, but we'll watch you. So we had a spot about a mile wide to come out over onto the channel, English Channel out of Belgium. and apparently there's a swamp or something, and they said there are no guns there. So they said, that's where you come out. Well, with all this going around, coming out, my bombardier, or my navigator, brought me dead center on that spot, and we came right out over the channel now, started flying straight and level, headed for home. Cause we're low. We gotta get over the cliffs of Dover when we get over there. So, just as we got out over the channel, lost number 4. Unbeknownst to anybody, they had flak barges out in the channel, and they knocked out number 4. It feathered. So now we got 1 engine running, and 2 feathered, and 1 windmilling, and we aren't doing too well. We threw out. We're out over the channel, so we threw out anything we could to lighten the weight.
Did you throw the guns overboard too?
Yeah, guns, and we all had flak suits. We dumped them and anything we could throw out. And we finally got over the cliffs of Dover, and field right in front. And there was an airplane in front of me, and I told the engineer, I said, throw up a flare, red flare, and get him out of there. So he threw up a flare, and they pulled that airplane out. So we brought down him. We got down the ground, couldn't get it off the runway with 1 engine. And the guys got out, you know, and they run around down on the ground, kissing the ground, and stuff like that, you know. And by the way, I had my bombardier had professed to be an atheist, but he became a good Christian, and was until the day he passed away.
Was anyone injured or wounded
No.
on that flight?
No, I was going to get to that.
Okay.
The boys got out there and they counted holes in the airplane. They counted up over 100, and some of them were, most of them were small holes, but one of them was about as big as a bushel basket, and there wasn't one of us scratched. But the medical people showed up over there to see, and they grounded us right there. And they said, you boys are going to a rest camp for a week. So we went to, down in southern England. It was, I guess, an old, I don't know, it wasn't probably a real big place, you know, where they had bedrooms, and the Red Cross people were running it. And we stayed down there for a week. You had to come to dinner every night in Class A uniform. Otherwise, you could wear what you want. They had bicycles. You could go riding out over the country, and so on and so forth. But the end of the week, then we go back, and now comes the final mission. And we found out we were going to Merseburg, Germany, which is a synthetic oil plant. We'd been there before, and it was a rough one. And when you go down to breakfast, if you got fresh eggs, you knew you were going out on a rough one. If you got powdered eggs, milk run. But I never did get one of those milk runs.
Now, what number was this mission?
This is number 17.
Okay.
It's number 17. So we know we're going to Merseburg, and we've been there before, and we know it's going to be rough. But we take off, and we get over there, and there are clouds, and there was some mix-up that I don't think anybody really knows for sure what happened, but we dropped our bombs on what we thought was a synthetic oil plant, and right after we dropped our bombs, for some reason or other, our group is going this way. The whole Air Force is going this way. The Germans sitting up there, and they see 900 and some airplanes over here and 36 over here. Who are they going to hit? they picked us. And they pulled our fighters who were supposed to stay with us and protect us.
Mm-hmm.
They pulled them off in a dogfight, the Germans did. And I told the guys, I said, keep your eyes open, we're going to be hit. And sure enough, they came down in groups of 15 behind us and dropped their gear and flaps, started pumping 20 millimeter into us. And I never saw a fighter at all. After they sat there and run out of ammunition or whatever, they just roll over and peel out down underneath. And they told me that my rudder and vertical stabilizer was gone. I could hear the shells exploding in the back of the airplane, and you could feel them.
Mm-hmm.
But we never saw from where we were. I'm flying formation, that's my job.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now
the next group came in, and I saw about 6 or 8 feet go off my left wing, and could feel them, the shells exploding in the back. Then the third group kind of missed us. And the fourth group came in, and we got 2 20 millimeters right in the cockpit beside my co-pilot. And I didn't know whether he's hurt bad or what, but we're on fire now.
Mm-hmm.
So the top turret gunner, he comes down and grabs the extinguisher, and we think we have the fire out, and then it flares up again. Well, then there's nothing to do but get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I rang the bailout signal, and I reached over and grabbed William out of his seat, yanked him out, and got him headed down. I didn't know whether he's hurt bad or what. And the top turret gunner, he'd already gone down.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now, did you have a ball turret gunner too?
yeah,
Underneath?
yeah, he's underneath. I'll get to him in a minute. I got out of my seat and started down, and I felt the airplane climbing, and I thought, if this thing stalls out, nobody will get out of it. So I just crawled back up there. I didn't get in the seat, just crawled back up there and reached over and just pushed the controls forward. Got the nose down, then I went down, and Bill's sitting down there with his feet hanging out. So I just put my foot in the middle of his back and kicked him out. And then I sat down there and rolled out, and just as I dropped clear, it blew. Of course, I didn't see it, but I heard it, and I could feel it. Because when you jump out like that, your eyes automatically close. You're jumping out into, you're moving probably 160, 170 miles an hour, so your eyes aren't going to stay open.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't see it blow, but I heard it and I felt it. Then I'm out there, I'm in clouds, and I'm thinking, what happens if I rip this cord and they got updrafts in these crowds? We used to ask them, if you have to get out of that thing, how do you do it? And they said, don't worry, when time comes, you'll do it. And they were right. And so I got playing around with my hands, and I knew when I had the wind in my face that I was looking down. And that's what I wanted, so when I broke out of the clouds, I could know how far I was above. I figured I'd break out about 10,000. But there's a lot lower than that when I did break up. And I broke out of the clouds, and I was pretty close, and I ripped my cord, and the parachute worked perfectly, and I didn't swing over maybe 2 or 3 times, and then I'm on the ground. And almost stayed on my feet, but the chute dragged me and I went over on my behind, but I'm getting out of that chute as fast as I can, because within about 30 feet away were 3 women with pitchforks coming after me, and they weren't friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to get out of that thing as fast as I could. I got out of it real quick, and I had a 45 strapped on me. I didn't take it out, but I unbuckled it, and they backed off. And then I I was real close to a road. I ducked down into the road and across and up the other side and started across the field. And they were coming in rifles, so I just sat down and put my hands up. And
They were German soldiers?
no, civilians.
Civilians?
They said get under military control as soon as you could.
Mm-hmm.
So these people that came up to me, they had rifles, and they were women and men, and the women spitting in your face, and little kids throwing stones at you.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a guy in the distance that looked like he was in uniform, so I just told him, pointed, you know, and I want to go there. But I couldn't talk German, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that they could talk pretty good English. Little kids could anyway. But I got knocked down 3 or 4 times before I convinced them that I wanted to get over there.
Mm-hmm.
So they finally let me go over there, and then they took me into a small town, and the first person I saw of my crew was my tail gunner, and he was so glad to see somebody off the airplane, because, see, he came out of his turret way in the back of the airplane.
I was going to ask you about that because you said you lost your tail and
Yeah.
rudder, and I was wondering if you lost the tail gunner too.
No, the tail gunner got out,
Mm-hmm.
and real late on, he told me that the main door was gone, which means somebody got out.
Mm-hmm.
And little Joe Salerno was the waist gunner. He was an 18-year-old kid. And he was standing there, and my tail gunner motioned for him to go out. And he shook his head, no. And that, to me, that's not Joe. Joe wasn't afraid of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out real quickly what Joe was doing. He was in the waist gun, and Bob Kerner was in the ball turret, and they would switch on and off. And I think they had a deal between them. If I'm in the ball turret, you wait till I get out. And I think Joe was just standing there waiting for Bob to get out, and Bob didn't get out, and Joe lost him.
Mm-hmm.
And we think possibly being as the escape door was gone, that possibly the radio operator might have gone out. And then while we were on the ground, I was informed by some Germans that one of my comrades was bleeding, but they wouldn't let me go to him. And I got a feeling that could have been my radio operator.
Mm-hmm.
But those 3 boys killed in action. They held us in this sort of a backyard of a house for some time, and then that day the count was, in our squadron, 12 airplanes, we lost 9. Now that's 81 men.
Mm-hmm.
And I only saw 30-some of us alive. So some of the other planes lost a lot more than I did. But out of the group that they had rounded up, my co-pilot, we didn't see him for 3 or 4 days after that.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 Germans, one, they were apparently on leave or sick leave or something. One had a patch over his eye and the other had his arm in a sling, but they both had rifles. And they took another one of our boys that I had never knew before. His name was Jerry Silverman. And they took him and me and put us in a car, and we started cross country. We had no idea where or why. And I didn't realize that Jerry was Jewish. And they drive about 10 minutes and the car quit. So they get out, open the hood, clean, pull the plugs, clean them, put them back in, and we can go another 10 minutes. And one of these, about the next stop, one of those guys turned around and he wanted my wings. And he started to unpin them. And I hollered at him, no, and slammed his arm down over the back of the seat. And Jerry's sitting over there, he says, give him what they want, you go get us both killed, give it to him, anything he wants. And, but see, what they told us before was, you'll do a lot better if you stand up to the Germans than if you cater to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just playing the game. That's not the way I am. But I was playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I got away with it. And I slammed his arm down over the back of that seat, and they got out, cleaned their plugs, and we went on to where they were taking us to some town where their families were, and they all looking in to see what they'd caught.
Mm-hmm.
And then they drove us back, you know, to clean their plugs and got us back over where the others were. And that night they took us out, and I guess it looked like a one-room schoolhouse they put us in, and there was a latrine across the road, and there were 2 guards there, and there were 13 of us. And we were there for 2 or 3 days. Now every day, one of the guards would take a couple of us and go into town, and we had a little kid's wagon and get food. Well, we would argue with the guards, and I might be pulling the wagon, and the other guy would be back there pushing the wagon, or arguing with the guards. In the meantime, we're sticking everything we can in our pockets in the way of food for the other guys that are sick. And when we get back up there, then somebody's got to go to the bathroom across the road, so one guard's got to go that way, and the other guard, we get him in an argument, and I don't think they got to eat anything in the 4 or 5 days we were there, because we were manipulating, so we got all the food from the guys who were, we had some guys really in bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
One boy, tail gunner, his back broken in 3 places. Another, one of the pilots blown out of his airplane, and his head was so burned. And now you don't know what actually happened to these people who were hurt so badly. But we stayed there maybe 3 days, and they brought my co-pilot in to me while we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that a farmer and his daughter had picked him up, and they hid him for a couple of days, and then they got scared and turned him in. So he's not bleeding, you know, everything is, but he's in bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
So they moved us out of there on a train, and I don't know where they took him, but they moved us to Frankfurt for the interrogation center. Now, I think the reason we got away was the way we treated these guards that were guarding us, and they didn't fight us or anything. But I think they were under orders to make sure we got to interrogation. I think the Germans wanted us over there badly to see what was going on. So we ride this train, and we get into Frankfurt, and we have to walk from one end of Frankfurt to the other side to catch another train to take us out to the interrogation center. And I never saw a full building standing. Everything was shattered in that town of Frankfurt. And we get over to the over to the other station, and it was a little while before the train, and there was some gal in there. She's a good-looking German gal, and she could get a riding crowd rounding up in a hurry and coming after us. And the guards finally just locked us in a room down in the basement. They couldn't hold the crowds off.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the train came, and it was just a short ride to the interrogation center. were there about 3 days. We give them nothing but name, rank, and serial number. About the third day I was in there, the interrogator, he said, well, if you won't tell me, I'll tell you. And he told me things that I didn't think my parents knew. He told me about when I was in 5th grade, I was sent to the principal's office. And they knew that our bombardier had made major, which we didn't know. They had a system, and they were working on it a long time. And the only way I can figure that they got this information, we'd be sitting up here on the farm as a kid, and college students come through walking, selling magazines.
Mm-hmm.
And Mother would always invite them in for dinner, and then she'd sit there and talk to them in the afternoon, and I think those were spies.
Mm.
That's the only way I can figure that they got this information.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that Dad knew that, or Mother knew that I had gone to the principal's office for a little. All I did was went down the slide head first. I wasn't supposed to do that. But they seemed to know everything. And I just told the guys, I said, just don't talk. Name, rank, serial number, that's it. Third day they pulled us out, when it got on the train, headed the camp. And we went to a town of Sagan, southeast of Berlin. No, northeast. Anyways, up there somewhere in that area. And that's the one, if you saw the movie, The Great Escape, that's the camp that took place in. All the time we were in there, we were working on escape deals,
Mm-hmm.
but the commanding officer in there, our commanding officer, he made rules. We had our own government in there, and nobody was to try to escape. If you had a plan and you wanted to do it, you come to them and tell them what it is, and the whole camp will work on it. And they made a court-martial offense to try to escape on your own. And there were 2 or 3 escapes went on while I was in there.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them failed because of exactly what I said. We had a deal where we had a tower, and they had searchlights, and they had machine guns on it, and then you had your barbed wire fence, and you had a warning fence inside of that. And you didn't go over the warning wire, never. So it was winter, and we had 11 guys dressed up in, made out of sheets,
Mm-hmm.
white clothes, and they were hiding in the latrine, and they knew there was a space right under that tower that he couldn't see. So 11 of them went out that night and got out clean and free. Then 2 other guys said, well, they made it, I'm going to try it, and they got caught. So immediately they were looking, had a count, and knew that some were gone. So the guys, they just had to hold up, and the 2 of them just screwed up the whole deal for the 11 that got out.
So the 11 got captured?
Yeah. What happened to them, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that, all the time we were in there, I got in, we were tunneling all the time. And I went down the tunnel once, I would never go again. It just, I couldn't take it.
Mm-hmm.
The way we were getting to that tunnel, they had one building, all the buildings were up on stilts because we had a habit of going down through the buildings and going
Mm-hmm.
out. So they put all the buildings up on stilts, so we couldn't do that. So this was sort of a place where we could go and sit and listen to music and stuff. At the YMCA got records and machines, and you could go in there. So you'd go down there, but you couldn't just go in. The guards were there and watching you. But before you go in, they had a big stone in front of it. You had to walk up on the stone and then into a building. So we all gathered around, and they moved the stone. That's our entrance to the tunnel. And you go down into that, and then they slide the stone back. They go in. Then later on, they have another show, and everybody's out there to go to the next show, and then we can come out that way.
Mm-hmm.
We bring dirt out in stockings down inside our breeches.
Oh, just like the movie.
Yeah, yeah. And but I got down in there once. I wouldn't go again.
Mm-hmm.
But the German people, the German soldiers, they couldn't do anything on their own. I guess they weren't supposed to. They hauled a wagon load, horse-drawn wagon load of potatoes in one day and drove over one of our tunnels, and it fell in. And they just went and got another wagon, pulled the potatoes out, put them in that wagon, and towed it away. Meantime, we covered up. We knew nothing about it. It wasn't our tunnel.
Okay, I'm going to stop right here. I got to change tapes. Okay, before we continue, let me just ask you, how accurate was that movie, The Great Escape? Was there a lot of similarities to what you had gone through?
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
It when you first get in there, nobody will talk to you until somebody identifies who you are. They figure you might be a mole in there, you know. And I ran into my roommate from basic training.
Oh.
He okayed me, and then I okayed the rest of my crew.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you together, like officer enlisted, or strictly officer?
These were all officers in the camp I was in.
Okay.
The enlisted men, they went to another camp somewhere, but they were staff sergeants, which they made them all so that the Germans couldn't make them work.
Mm-hmm.
But we were in there, and we were in barracks, and my barracks commander was Colonel Gabreski. You probably have heard of him. Fighter ace,
Mm-hmm.
World War II,
Yep.
and then a jet ace from later wars. He passed away just a short time ago. But every morning and evening they would put you out on the parade ground by barracks, and the old major or commander of the camp would come around and give the Heil Hitler salute, and your barrack commander would just return it, you know, with a regular salute, and all accounted for, one's in the hospital, and so on and so forth. And this was in January, and we're hearing guns. The Russians are getting close. So on January 10th or somewhere in that area, we didn't have a calendar, and I don't know exactly what day it was. But one morning they routed us out of there. There were 10,000 of us in that camp. And at 1 o'clock in the morning they routed us out and put us out on the road running. And they had guns and they had dogs. So when they said run, you ran. Blizzard, 30 below zero, and you would run 10 minutes and then walk 10 minutes, and then at the end of the hour they give you a 5-minute break. And this kept up all day, and somewhere down there machine guns started going off, and I just dove into a snowbank and stayed there till things quieted down. Never did know what it was about.
Mm-hmm.
And they did put out the word that if you fall out, they just run you through the bayonet, and that's it. So down on the break at 5:30, I had another pair of socks I had a GI overcoat, and I had GI shoes, and I had a GI blanket, and those I hung on to. And as we left the camp, they ran us through a warehouse, and they threw a Red Cross parcel, which had food in it. Well, we haven't got gloves, and 30 below, you can't carry it, so I just busted mine open, pulled out everything I could, and stuck it in my pockets. And leave room for my hands in there too, and proceeded on down the road. But at that break, I decided I had a clean pair of socks in my pocket, so I decided I'd probably be a good idea to change them. So I did, and my shoes froze. I couldn't get my feet back in. So I just had to walk around for a while until it heated them up enough I could get my feet down in. And then we started walking again, and we're now, it's dark. And we had two guys who were up and down that line. One was a lieutenant colonel, West Point graduate, and the other was, I don't know what his position was or rank was, but he played football for Penn State, great big guy, Polish boy, and we just called him Smitty. We couldn't pronounce his name. Well, I got so tired, I figured, now, if I just sit down, I'll fall asleep, and that's it. And I just couldn't go any further. So I sat down, and Smitty got to me. And he just slapping the daylights out of me and cursing me and get your blankety blank up and get moving. So I thought to myself, I got to get up and get away from him. So I got up and started moving again. Well, then they brought my bombardier, Sam. And Sam was completely out of it. He had no idea who he was or where he was or why. So they wanted somebody that knew him to take him. So I got well in a hurry. I'm fine now. I got to take care of Sam. And you'd be surprised how well it worked. So I got Sam, grabbed him by the shoulder, you know, and we keep him going down through there. And Sam slipped up. We stopped for something. And Sam's sitting down there, and he looked up at me, and he says, I know who you are. You're the best damn pilot in the world. So I never let him forget that. I told him, when you're down and out, completely gone, the truth really comes out, doesn't it? But Sam really saved my life, because up till then I was bound, determined. I just couldn't do it. But when you have to, you do. And when you see somebody else that needs you to help them, it really makes a big difference. So anyway, they got into, can't remember the names of the towns, but we got in there, and they put us in churches, and there were concrete floors, and it was cold. And the next morning, the burgomaster of this town, from what we heard, had a son who was a PW in the U.S. So he took over from the military. It's the only time I saw anybody take over from the military. And opened up, they had pottery factories there. And opened up the drawing rooms and put this bunch in there. It was warm. We stayed in there 2 or 3 days. And then they moved us out of there, and we marched, I don't know, not too far, to a railroad station. And they put us in these little box cars, 50 to a car. You couldn't even sit down. And I don't know how long we stayed on that. I still had my blankets, and 2 or 3 other guys had blankets. And there were rings on the top of the car, so we managed to get 5 or 6 hammocks up there, get some of them off the floor to make a little more room for the other guys. And we were in there probably a day and a half, something like that. And we pulled into Nuremberg and went into a camp there. Now, Nuremberg was nasty, filthy, dirty. You'd walk in to your barracks room and you see rats come running down the wall and walk across the guys that are sleeping. And food, we were getting a cup of soup a day. If it was bean soup, there's a worm in every bean. If it was vegetable soup, I'd see my dad throw stuff out. He wouldn't feed his cows better than that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're hungry, you eat it anyway. And we were there for a while. You had to get in a line to get water, and all you could get was a tin can of water. That's all you could get. And you were in a line, and you probably in the line for an hour to get your cup of water. And we were there probably a month or two. And I got bitten with bugs from head to foot. And apparently it all settled in my right knee because it just swelled up and I couldn't walk. I just couldn't do anything, no bend, couldn't do anything with it. And they put me in a barracks they called the hospital. Mm-hmm. And there was an American soldier in there who was a doctor, and he was running the hospital. So they put a hot water bottle on it overnight. The next morning they set me up in the chair and he says, hang on, and somebody grabbed my shoulders and he asked for his sharp knife and he cut a hole in my knee, squeezed out a cup full of stuff, and he had penicillin tablets. He didn't know what they were because it was new. Mm-hmm. And he just stuck tablets in there. It done more good, I guess, if he fed them to me, but he put them in there and then he tore up a sheet and just wrapped it up. And he said, we're going to move out of here now in about 2 or 3 days, and I'll fix it up so you can ride on the train. And I told him, no way. We had a radio in there and could get BBC, and the Germans knew we had the radio, but they could never find it. Mm-hmm. And we had the information that our boys now were shooting up anything, even if they had a Red Cross on it. Because we saw, and we knew why, because we saw trains where they load tanks on them and cover them with Red Cross and moving them to the front lines. So our boys had gotten wise to that, so I wasn't going to get on any train at all. I'd get out there and walk. And afterwards they told me it's the best thing I could have done for my knee anyway. So the first day out, we got strafed by our boys. A couple boys got nicked or something, but they sort of down the side of us to try and figure out what we were and who we were. So we just peeled off clothes and made a big POW sign. And from then on, we had fighter escort all the way down into Bavaria on this. It was 4 or 5, 6 day trip. And by then, we were actually bribing the German guards to stay with us because there were SS troops in the area. And you didn't want a bunch of Americans floating around and SS troops down there because they just mow you down. So we were bribing the guards, and the civilians then were, I saw a bunch of civilian women attack our camp commander, the German camp commander. They attacked him. He was riding a bicycle, and they knocked him down and knocking him around pretty good. And we finally got down to, well, before we got there, we were in one town somewhere, and actually you could take off. I took off and walked probably a couple of miles to another town and found some kids over there, and I bought a couple of eggs from them and gave them a couple of cigarettes that the Red Cross had gotten into us. And then I came, they had a home guard in uniform, and he came out and he apparently couldn't talk English. He didn't say anything, but he followed me till I'd left and gone back. make sure I didn't stay around town.
Mm-hmm.
But by then, the German civilians, they were screaming and hollering. When the Americans going to get here? They wanted us to get them to get there before the Russians did.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw one farmer there. We stayed in his hay mow, and at night it was clean hay. It was a really nice place to stay.
Now the war wasn't over at that point.
No,
Okay.
it's still going. And his kids are out there, and you can see the kids' ribs. And I told him, I said, why don't you kill one of your chickens and feed your kids? His answer was, it's a death penalty to kill that chicken without a government permit. So, anyway, we finally get down to Moosburg. And I guess all the POWs in Germany were in there. They said there was over 100,000 in that camp. And we got in there, and we knew that it was a Sunday morning. We knew that Patton was coming. Got it on information on our radio.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, they had it set up where if the Germans tried to move us again, we were to put sheets on a signal on top of certain building in the place. And exactly 10 o'clock that Sunday morning, first tank rolled over the top of that hill, and they were throwing stuff into the town. Another one came down. They didn't open the gate or nothing, just came in the camp with a big tank. And right behind it was a pickup truck, and old General Patton standing up in the back of it, pearl-handled pistols and all. And I knew where the group where they would be, but I still having a problem getting around. I came down this street, and here come Patton down the street, and I threw a salute at him, and he returned it, and got around to where he made a little speech about 10 minutes. And then he says, okay, fellas, got a war to win, see you later. He's gone.
Now, the guards had taken off when they saw the Americans approaching?
No, the guards had a choice. They could take off if they wanted to, or they could stay. And from what I heard, one of the commanding German commanders that was in there, he didn't make it through the day. There was the one just under him, they put out the word, you take care of him. Because he was the kind, instead of giving the Heil Hitler salute, he come down and give a salute and holler, hubba hubba. And I think in peacetime he was over at the schools of Berlin or something. He was, and he did what he could for the POWs without getting himself into a pile of trouble. So the word was out, you take care of him. And the other guards that stayed there, they were treated decently. But there was one in there that made life miserable for everybody, and they said he didn't make it through the day. And of course we had all the time the fighters were coming down, and before Patton came in, fighters would come down, and it's funny to see the guards, when they see those airplanes coming, they scramble to the floor, get down on the ground. But then they drew spades to see who would come out first, and my commanding officer of this area pulled the ace of spades. So I came out on the 7th airplane. The C-47s or the DC-3s were coming in with supplies for Patton, and then they load POWs and haul them out to France. So I came out early. I came out on the 7th airplane out because my commanding officer had pulled the ace of spades. And we went over to, well, we were in France. They stopped in Paris to refuel. And while we were on the ground there, I ate 19 donuts. I'm trying to get more. they wouldn't give me any more. And then we got to what they called, I can't think of it. But anyway, it was, they were bringing all the POWs in there, and you went in and you got a bath and chemical bath and so on and so forth, and threw all your clothes away, and they gave you enough, you know, pants and underwear and clean stuff to get on. And then they asked us if we would give up our quarters on the ship going home. And we figured probably sick and wounded, they would put in those quarters, and we would be in, you know, other quarters, but not the best quarters on the ship. So they pulled out and went up to England, and we were very disappointed. They loaded on a bunch of British war brides. They got the good quarters, and but I didn't care then. They could put a log behind, and I'd have ridden it home. But we came home and came into Camp Miles Standish up in Boston.
Now, when was this?
This would have been May.
Okay. I guess the war ended.
Yeah, May of '45.
Yeah.
And we got off the boat and on a train and went into Camp Miles Standish. And there's a whole bunch of German POWs in there wearing brand new American uniforms with a PW written on the back. We come off that train and went after them. They had to get all the MPs around there to round us up. And then went in the mess hall that night. And I'm in the mess hall, and I'm right behind Smitty, this big guy, you know, that bagging me around out there. And the Germans were serving the food, so Smitty, they just put it on a tray, and Smitty said, I want 3 more steaks. The German shook his head, no. The German went flying across the room. And immediately the brass got in there and informed everybody, these guys get anything they want. And there's a couple of days later, we got on a train, went down to Atlanta, Georgia, and at that time, my ex-wife was living in Nashville. So went down to Atlanta, went through.
So you were married at that?
I got married before I went overseas.
Okay.
Big mistake. But anyway, from there, they put us on I guess it was a 30-day leave. So I caught a bus and went home, and then shortly came up here and spent some time on the farm, and then I went up to Plattsburgh to a hospital for a while, Army hospital for a while, and went home and tried to get back into swing of things. I went back down to GE that's where I was working when I left and went in the service, and I didn't stay there but a couple of weeks. I don't know how we won the war from what I saw there then. Maybe it wasn't going on during the war, but there was a woman in there, and they took her out of the area that I was in, put her on piecework, and she couldn't make 50 cents a day. And I spent a couple of days just trying to do it least amount I could, and I still was putting out more than anybody else in there. But that's all another story. So anyway, I got lucky then, and I finally, first the airlines wouldn't even talk to you. They said, you guys fly too rough. But eventually I guess they found out maybe that wasn't so bad. And I flew a couple of years for a non-sked airline, which was enjoyable, but you were gone all the time. You didn't know where you were going. You didn't know when you're coming back.
Now, where were you living at that point?
I was living in, where was it? Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the trips out, I had a long layover or something in Michigan. So I caught a train and went over to Chicago and went in, talked to American Airlines and got hired. So I told him, I said, well, don't let me tell my boss when I get home that I'm leaving. And they said, okay, they wouldn't, but when I got back, he knew. He had flown for American before, I guess, so somebody let him know. I got with American Airlines and couldn't have had a better job. Loved flying. Never had any big problems with American. I was in the co-pilot seat for 11 years, but that was because everything was based on seniority. And right after I got in, they quit hiring for quite some time. But then when I was flying out of Nashville, and then we were flying the smallest equipment there was, and I wanted to get on the bigger ones, and the jets, especially them coming in. So I went up to Washington, D.C., and my wife, she wouldn't go up there, so I finally just filed suit. That was the end of that. But then I got to Chicago and flying co-pilot, and very soon I'm flying captain. And when you do that, you go back to the old piston airplanes. You fly them for a little while, and then you start working your way up on them. And ended up flying on the DC-10, which is a 289 passenger airplane. Jet. I loved it. I stayed about 11 years on a 3-engine jet. Had 3 engines in the tail. I stayed on it for 11 years because that way I got pretty senior.
Was that like the 727?
727 is what it was. I'm getting so I can't remember some of those details. But I love that 727. It was a nice airplane. But then somebody told me that for retirement purposes, you better get on a bigger airplane. So I went to the 10, and I really enjoyed it. That 10, 727, you can push your throttles up down the road and taxi on and take off. DC-10, if you did that, it don't work. You idle it up and get it lined up, because when you push the throttles up, it's going where it's pointed. And no turning at all. But it pushed you back in your seat. I really liked it. And it turned out I had a close call on it. I took a flight from Chicago to Phoenix on a 10 and left the airplane there, and I flew another one back to Chicago and went home, went to bed. I got home about 6 in the morning or something like that. It was a night flight. And about noon, my wife woke me up. She said, "You better get up and watch TV." And I went in there. I said, "That airplane that crashed on takeoff at O'Hare, killed everybody, full airplane. Worst, I guess the worst accident, more deaths than ever was in any accident." And I looked at it. I said, "That's the airplane I flew last night to Phoenix." And I brought another one back. And shortly after that, the phone rang. It's the chief pilot. And he says, "Guess what?" And I said, "I know, I flew an airplane last night." He said, "I just want to know one thing. What kind of a landing did you have out there?" I see, right off the start, see, they got to nail it onto somebody.
Yeah.
So I told him I wouldn't tell him. I said, "You call the co-pilot and ask him." The co-pilot is a young fellow. He'd flown with me a lot on the 727, but never on the 10. So we were sitting there talking before we left, and he says he never had a bad landing in a DC-10. So when I got out there to Phoenix that night, I said, well, I guess I better sit up and show him something. And never even felt the wheels touch, never even heard him. And he just looked over at me and he says, well, you can slick them on too, can't you? So that eliminated that theory.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out there were 30-some airplanes that the same problem. And the amazing thing to me was it could have happened on that airplane any time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why it happened on when it did. But it makes you wonder, if that had happened, what would I have done?
Mm-hmm.
But I think I probably would have done better than they did. Because I had one real good chief pilot early in the airline, and he says if you get in trouble, you don't worry about the trouble. Fly the airplane. And I think that's what I would have done. This one, the co-pilot was flying it, and the captain, he was rated as one of the best.
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to figure out what went wrong when he should have been making sure the airplane was flying properly.
Mm-hmm.
There was no procedure at all for what happened. The engine just broke off, and instead of dropping to the ground, it broke off under power, and it came up over the top of the wing and tore out leading edge where there are lift devices. So the left wing quit flying, the right one's still flying, and it went over.
Mm-hmm.
But he also pulled the nose up and bled his airspeed back to what another procedure, if you lose an engine, your best flight speed to get out of there. But if he'd have kept the speed he had already, it wouldn't have gone so quick.
Mm-hmm.
He might have pulled it out of there. But that's what experience does for you.
Mm-hmm. And did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Did you join any veterans organizations?
There aren't any around here. I joined the ex-POW group.
Mm-hmm.
And spent more time with them. Of course, the 457 bomb group used to go to all their meetings, but it got so the brass were trying to take it over, and they're leaving out the little guy.
Uh-huh.
And to me, the little guy, the engineers and those people, I could never say anything against the engineering.
Mm-hmm.
I never had an airplane that was bad. We had some, that you had problems with.
Well, that was something I was going to ask you. Did you mostly fly the same airplane?
I had my own airplane, but in 17 missions I flew it 3 times. The rest of the time they put it back together.
Now, did your airplane have a name, or was it painted with any kind of nose art?
Yeah, the guys named it Shad. I got married, just before and went overseas, and they said that I kind of skinnied down to just a shadow, so it was the short for Shad.
Okay. Was there any kind of artwork on it?
I don't think, they just wrote Shad
Just
on the side,
Okay.
but we didn't. Seemed like every time they were putting it back together.
Mm-hmm. Did you decorate your jacket at all?
I had my wings on it, and every time you'd make a mission, you put a bomb on.
Okay.
But you never wore that when you went over there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I never got the jacket back.
Yeah.
No, they, as a matter of fact, that morning I put on a little lightweight jacket. It wasn't a military jacket, which I normally didn't, but it was raining that morning when we went out to get on the airplane, so I had it on. And I had it on when I bailed out. I had my billfold in it. And the Germans, of course, they confiscated everything, watch and ring, and
Mm-hmm.
they did give me back my wedding ring, and that was all. But I got a receipt. I just gotten paid, and I had maybe $250 or something like that in it. And they gave me a receipt, I think, for 59 cents on a pocket comb. And that was it.
Mm-hmm. How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
Smartest move I ever made.
Mm-hmm.
Before, I don't know, when I got into that thing, college, to be frank with you, I was flunking out.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't, I got to see wheels turn. And this thing opened up, and I didn't figure I'd ever make it, but I applied for it. And I made it. Like I said, there were 30-some of us went in that morning, and 6 of us made it out of the 30-some. And I couldn't have had a better job after I got back home. It's just never, when you're flying airplanes, I had a little motto: if I don't learn something today, I'm going to quit flying.
Mm-hmm.
And I never had to quit flying. You always learn something. And it's always a contest. Get that airplane off and land it as smoothly as you can. And it's always you always let the co-pilot have it. I'd always let him have the first leg.
Mm-hmm.
That way he doesn't know what I want. And he's going to fly it the way it should be, what the American Airlines wants and what the FAA wants. So I would always let my co-pilot, he'd fly the first leg, and he hasn't got the slightest idea of what I want. And when I was flying co-pilot, if you didn't fly it the way some of those captains wanted, you're in trouble. So just some of the little things that went on that
Mm-hmm.
made life easier. I had one captain that nobody would fly with, and so I was junior enough. Eventually, I'd get him every once in a while, and we were going like from Knoxville up to Roanoke, and it was rough. This was a 2-engine prop.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was flying it. So he said, well, take it down through those clouds and be smooth down there. I told him, I says, there's mountains down there. We'd be below our minimum altitude. And he said, that'll make this going down. And I said, I'm not going to. And he tried to take it away from me. And I says, you're not going down there. And I wouldn't let him take it away from me. And we get up to Roanoke, and he looks over at me and he says, you deliberately disobeyed me, didn't you? And I said, yes, sir, and I'll do it again under the same circumstances. And we were still hemming and pawing. We left out of there going to Washington, D.C., and he finally looked over at me and he says, I think when we get back, we'll have to go in and see the chief pilot. His name was Harry Winstead. And I said, Harry, that's the smartest thing you said all day. And he's going to hit me. I said, you hit me and I'll be the last one you'll ever hit. And we got to be good friends after that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just one of those guys. He had to be it and
Mm-hmm.
his way. And it got so nobody would fly with him. As a matter of fact, they had to run him out of the base at Nashville, and he went out to Fort Worth. And he hadn't been out there a month, and he got beat up on the parking lot by a couple of flight engineers.
All right, well, thank you very much for your interview.
Well, I enjoyed doing it.
It was very enlightening and it was excellent. Thank you.
Wasn't too long, was it?
Oh, no, not at all.
Says I talked too much.
So it was. All right, I'm going to get some shots here of your memorabilia. This one picture at the bottom, that was when you were commissioned, when you graduated from flight school.
Yeah, I got my wings.
Okay.
That's the only way I can tell.
Okay, and then the picture right above it, that's your crew.
Yeah.
And which one are you?
Co-pilot, navigator, bombardier. These, he stayed in the service, retired as a brigadier general.
Really? Was he
Yeah.
an enlisted man there?
Yeah. And these are the three boys I lost.
Okay.
And this was, he's still alive. This is a tail gunner.
Okay. Is he gone now, the tail gunner?
Yeah. Yeah, he passed away, I think, January of this year.
Okay. And that photo of you over on the right, that's is a cadet?
Yeah. Yeah, this aviation cadet.
Okay.
And this one down here, I don't know, I guess it is too.
Yeah.
Because I got the,
Cadet wings.
on that hat.
Okay. And that's your ID that I'm focused in on up there when you were a POW?
Yeah.
Okay, your awards. And this one is when you worked for American Airlines. That one right there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and oh, there's some more awards over here. Okay, and you have some more photographs. You want to, if you want to just sit right here and show them. Oops.
Can you get a better one of this if I?
Actually, I think the one I got on the wall was pretty good.
Okay.
But yeah, show that to me again. If I'm too close, it gets kind of blurry. So I think it's all right if you keep it in the
Okay.
book. Yeah, if you just hold it against your chest, I can zoom right in on it.
Must be a good camera.
And that's the airplane you flew mostly, 2847. So
No,
number.
that's they just lined the people up and took pictures.
Okay. All right. And you got some more photos?
Let's see. I don't think there's a picture that was taken on the same target the same day that I was shot down. It's not me, but
Uh-huh. Okay.
that's some of the things that went on.
Okay, what's that picture there?
It's it's one that was in a magazine.
This picture here?
No, this one?
Yeah.
No, that's me and my mother
Oh, okay.
before I went overseas.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Okay, I want to get a shot of your B-17 cockpit.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and again, thank you for your interview.